Well, Komala, Gregor has recently shared kind of his story around um, claiming his right to be and a part of his story of reconnecting to um, his ancestral line and the kind of um, qualities, but maybe also challenges that were in there. Is there a story that you want to bring in around you reconnecting to your roots and how that's connected to the work that you'll be offering in the right to be?
So I am born in Brazil, just to start with that, because that's where my roots comes from, my ancestors. And let's say even to think even broader, um, my ancestors comes from Africa, indigenous people, and Europe. And I left my country, Brazil, about 34 years ago and went to India for my search. And what happened when I went that far away from my country is that very soon I started working on my family roots. I needed somehow that long distance and space to really and the right environment to be able to start looking to my mother, father, and then from there starts the whole process. And from that, I went very much into my own individual work in different ways. And I kind of forgot a bit my roots. I went back to Brazil every year for visiting, but I live away for 34 years from Brazil. But I work on my connection with this land really, really deeply. And especially came back to me about, I think, 12 years ago, when I started working with Thomas Hubel. This question started arising again about my sense of home. And then I started going very deep into research, really like wanting to know what's happening there, what happened, what are my background, who are my great-grandparents, and so on, which was a little bit obscure in the beginning. I didn't know much. I don't know much about my history, which I think is quite different from Gregor. I just had some hint, and then I started following and getting information. So the information came from also really talking to an aunt and talking to my father that was still alive, and really getting to know what was going on there on my ancestors and my ancestry. But then the most, I'd say, most information I received, or in combination with those, was coming from inside of me. And I think that's where, that's the link to this work and the passion then that became this work with ancestors. And the understanding that my ancestry is actually happening inside of me. I'm carrying that, is an information that I'm carrying. And this happened through different ways, through meditation and really like going to my body, because my ancestors are actually living as an information in my body. And in that way, also my whole body, mind, emotional system. And I did receive lots of information. Beside that, I did a DNA test, which was also interesting, to confirm also what I already felt and the information I received. And so all of this together made me really go deep into also journeys, because then that's the shamanic part of the work for me, is to enter into my body, and through my body meeting images, really real images that becomes very, very alive and very real, and and then inform me about very powerful energies coming from my ancestors.
Mm.
I remember having probably one of the most strongest experience was I made a decision to really enter my body and meet my African ancestors. And what I felt and experienced in my body was very, very strong. And I started just seeing first like a very strong black feet running through the forest and running very fast and a very strong energy. And slowly this image started becoming very alive. And I see and I felt almost in my body this black, strong male energy running and running for his life and escaping. And it was basically this, I was so clear to me, this is like a African ancestors of mine that was escaping from slavery. And this became for me such a power in my body. And I feel it when I speak about it, I feel it. You know, I feel it in my legs, in my hands. And this became a very powerful resource for me to connect with my roots, which, let's say, it's also a very hurt root, because slavery in Brazil has been very, very heavy, very painful, and creates lots of consequences that we can see nowadays in the society, in the way it is in Brazil. And of course, also in me, I'm carrying that. But to meet that power and that energy of the fighter and the beauty, it was, and it is a very strong resource for me. Mm. And from that, then receiving that energy, then I have much more power, much more space and capacity to also look into the places where it's difficult. Also in my whole ancestry and all the other lines. And yeah, so this is very much a very strong base of the work that we are offering and that we do, is that to connect with the gifts and the power and the strength that comes from our ancestry, that have many, many levels, that starts from our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. I mean, our parents, when they are already, when they left their bodies, then they become ancestors. That's the idea, or that's how we work with it. And then great-great-grandparents and all the generations that comes before us, to meet the power and the resources that are present, because we need that. Without the resources and the essential qualities that we have received, because we all have received that, because we are here alive in our bodies today. Without that connection, it becomes very challenging to meet the difficult parts, the places that needs tending, that needs care, that needs to be opened and seen and felt, so that healing can happen and movement can happen. Yeah.
Can I jump in there?
Yeah.
So one thing that you said that I think is really helpful to understand is that the kind of work that because when I think about like connecting to my ancestors, I think at least one big association is like more of like, oh, digging in some sort of history books and this kind of stuff. And I'm guessing like that's part of what you're offering, is an invitation to like receive this kind of information. But I think it feels less common sense to say like, there is an inner way to connect to my ancestors, even if maybe there are parts of my family history that I have no idea about, and maybe there's no possibility to know more about it. Maybe even something like, oh, you know, I don't know, a parent of mine or something like this, that there's always this possibility kind of through turning inward to receive that information. And ultimately, well, tell me if I'm wrong, but like that's ultimately like what we want to experience, is that we want to feel like, yeah, my ancestors live inside of me. It's not like a mental thing of like, well, this was my father and this was my mother and so on, but it's like, wow, I can feel the, yeah, the experiences, the wisdom, and also the challenges of my ancestors living inside of me.
Yes.
I want to ask.
I just want to say one thing, and this living inside of me is not a metaphor, it's a real thing. It's living in my bones, it's living in my flesh, it's living in my, because we do come from this body, our physical body really comes, and there is no question about that, from the lived life and existing of my parents, grandparents, great grandparents, and so on unto the beginning of the times. So those ancestry is an information that is in our, like I said, in our bones, in our flesh, in our DNA. There is an information, and we can access that.
Mhm.
That's yeah.
Yeah, there's a question I want to ask both of you, which is, how is this kind of work different from I don't know, like the personal development, healing work that is very much focused on me as an individual? Like,
Mhm.
what are things that, like, what are the limits of this kind of more individually focused work? Maybe even how did you get to this different kind of work? Like, how did that open up, and what makes this, you know, in the right places more powerful, or even maybe the only way to move certain topics or challenges that people might experience?
Mm. Yeah, maybe I'll have a go at this. And I think it's continue a little bit into what you already shared, the two of you, or what Komala shared about this exploring on the outside and on the inside, because I think that's super fundamental. Like also, I studied history, and I was always super curious about history, but it's always like history, it's out there. And then also early on, my family always did family research, so I knew about my ancestry in quite detailed ways, at least what's the recorded history, because that's also sometimes not always, like, even there's research, we don't always know if the ones that show up in the data are really the ancestors. Yeah. So already there it goes. And so there's always something that we know about the outer story. And this is super important, and it's also really important work, a part of this work that you know about, you know the names as much as you can and where people live, because it brings a lot of information. Even now when Komala speaks, you can feel this is something different, like ancestry from Africa, slaves, Brazil, the forests, the whole environment. It's different than my ancestry, which came from a radius about like maybe 40 kilometers if you go down 4 centuries or something like this, lived all in Central Europe or in Austria. And so, and to honor that it's not good or bad, it's just, it is something, and it's different, and it shapes us. And additionally, just what you said, like there is this story when we like, so we know we can research these stories, but they also come with a certain idea about how people then maybe were or lived their lives. And sometimes I often say in this work, there's stories that reveal, so they really open the door to understand more. But there's also stories unconsciously, often they kind of like conceal more. So they kind of like keep something in a certain box. Oh, this was this poor life, or this was this hard life, or this was this bad life, or this was this good life. But life's always so much more complex and so much more nuanced in every life. If there was a poor life, there might have been beauties and precious things there that we don't even know about. And so connecting to a life of an ancestor or all my ancestors from the inside, and in a way, even letting go of what I know and allowing a different information to come from the inside is super precious. And I had super surprising experiences with this, suddenly feeling a certain quality showing up in an ancestor that I had no idea or wouldn't have attributed it to this person at all. And then it becomes a strength. And then some people say, like, but maybe I'm just making this up and this is fantasy. I don't care, frankly.
Right.
If this becomes a lived experience in you, it's real. And if it's just fantasy, it will not last. But if it's something real, it will create quality in your life. And for me, for example, just to share a personal story, my grandfather had an accident when he was a young man, and this was during the Second World War. And so I only knew him with one arm. And I've worked with this a lot. When I did my first family constellation, it came out that it was a much more complicated story because he was about to be drafted for the war. I didn't want that. Could talk for hours on this, but that's not the point now. So I already knew a lot more about this nuance, but there was a moment some years later, also in a very large group, where for a week we kind of worked individually on our ancestry. And at one point, suddenly, I felt like as if he was speaking to me from the inside. And it was so powerful. And it was not even like revealing new information or something, but he became a lived experience in my heart and in my body. And again, this is maybe a bit also what is now to your question. It's a long way to get to your question. A bit different in this work is that also in the West, in Europe, in some way we have quite strongly disconnected from our more indigenous pre-Christian pagan roots, where in all cultures of the world, by no exceptions, being connected to the ancestors was a way of life. It was a way of being religious, because that's how you honor your own connection to life. That's where you come from. And also, it's not just you connect to the path by living this, you also know that one day you will be an ancestor. And that gives you a different responsibility. How am I living my life so that 7 generations, 20 generations into the future, they will feel me and feel like, oh, I can lean on this person's life and it's a resource, rather than having created more disturbance. So we really disconnected a lot from this, and also through Komala and her deepening of her shamanic work, which originally, if I may say so, you were not very connected to this in the beginning of your journey either. But there was a reconnecting to these roots and feeling like what a power it has. So through this, you connect a lot more to not so much the linear causal story, but more to the sense of this that is in your body. And in Western psychotherapy, as great as it is, even in standard constellation work, which is in some way very shamanic already by its essence, but still often it gets a lot about the story and then what really happened. And this is great, but there is this deeper sense that bypassing the reasoning mind, you go into a different connection. And this is often much more powerful than having to solve something, to be a vessel where you can feel this connection in yourself and things kind of fall into place. And I mean, Mal, you said so beautifully, like a quest for home often has something to do with also where I came from. And it can be a home that I still live in the same place as where my ancestors grew up, or you live on a different continent, but so there's an echo of generations, but there's also a place of feeling this inside myself, independent of where I live. So this has I would say it has many repercussions on very practical life, often how we connect to ancestors.
Yes, beautiful, yeah. When I look into this question, what's the difference from, let's say, individual work or certain ways of therapeutic work, I would say it's probably this idea that any kind of that individual work exists. I think it's not really real. It's not a reality. There is not such a thing even, because when I'm working on myself on any kind of way, in any therapeutic way of self-development way, I will be always looking into my connections with the world, with people I'm relating with, and situations I'm related with. But now in this work, it's I would say is the core of this work is that we are interconnected, interrelated with one another and with life. And it's like, for me, the gift of the shamanic work and the constellation work also have this quality. The constellation work is about bringing the interconnections that are in me into a certain space, right? And relating to that, and allowing the energies to find a balancing place, and a place where it's something helps me to see more clear something. And in shamanic work, in different cultures that are, let's say, based on shamanism, where, let's say, the religion or the spiritual practices, the way they organize themselves are based on a community and how a community connects with each other. And there is something that it touches me always when I think about that, and I see that, or I hear that, is that in an indigenous community, in the shamanic work, when one person is ill or is suffering, the whole community is ill. And I mean, this is so different from our modern individualistic society. And when one person heals in a space, in a community, the entire community is healing. And it's not only then between people, but the whole nature. There is a connection, a relation with everything that is around. This is like the basis for me of all spiritual practice and mysticism, basically. That we are basically always connected with everything that we are relating with. Mm-hmm. From the cup from where I'm drinking to you when I'm talking to you, to the people that are listening, and to the people that are present in me, in my mind when I think about them, and of course to the people that I am then relating with directly if I am in a group. Doesn't matter if it's a group of people I'm working with. Is it my family, partner, friends? There is the creating the space and remembering, basically is a remembrance that there is a link between us that is beyond our body. Is it in the space between us? And it's very power and creates a lot of possibilities. So when we come into a group space, which is then our intention and what we offer, and we call that, we really invoke that, we remember that together, that we are human beings who are have our own stories, and from maybe very different backgrounds. But when we come into the space together, we are bringing in to the space all our different energies, the resources, and also the challenges that are present in our fields. And eventually, I mean, in some places, we we will meet anyway. There is a place where we have common ancestors in this group of people. I'm just imagining now we are in a group of, in our group, in a workshop, they simply saying, and to invoke that energy and remember that we are connected and there is a linkage, and that from there we can build so much energy and space. We can create a space from where then we invite in the qualities, the strengths, which is present in the field. And this in shamanic work happens a lot through prayer. You know, it's actually this calling. This is a function of prayer which can happen through words, through singing, can happen through rattling, drumming, and then which are ways to let the mind kind of settle, and we go more into the body and the energy, and then we meet the field, which is a very alive. And this is when Gregor talks about this alive, the aliveness in the stories that we have, to bring that really like it's not anymore a story, it's a real energy. Mm-hmm. And in that we unfreeze actually the stories, because many times people come together, it's like we carry kind of frozen stories, which again is in our body, in our system. When we create there is more space and there is an opening, then it's like it becomes alive. It's real. It's not anymore a story, and we invite that. And this is very sacred. So for me, what makes the work, what I connect with shamanic work, is this sacredness, or the sacred. The sacred is basically aliveness.
Right.
And from there, so much possibilities happen, and through communication with what we are experiencing and feeling, in myself, between the people, magic can happen and happens. And
right.
This is the power of group work. And I experience this I experience in specific work which has this shamanic qualities, systemic ritual work. But I experience that in all workshops, in any kind of work that I'm doing, that this is the greatest power of the work. What makes it really happen and move is this feeling that everybody that is in the group room, that we are a group soul, that there is, the group has a soul and an energy, and we are actually we are growing together, we are healing together, and and this is a very beautiful base work in shamanic work. We are healing together, and we are expanding and moving together, and I think this is happening always anyway.
Yeah. Just to add, there's so much inspiration now listening. This is what happens when we work together. And again, this is, I think, is a real fundamental difference of doing individual work, whether it's like just on the individual, like this is the container or the sphere, the context of what I look like, what happened in my life, what did I experience, which is often and also the beautiful power of psychological individual work. I really take serious what I experienced and how that shaped me. But then also to add the context of all generations that came before me. And additionally, also to what you just described so beautifully, Komala, to put this into work as a community. And when we come together in a workshop, we form a community. And that's one of the things that we always experience. And I have to say, it's even stronger also when we do when I do constellation work, or we do this kind of work together. It's so strong that people very often, very quickly feel like, wow, I don't know what's happening, but I feel so safe. I feel so connected. I have a feeling I've known these people now since a very long time, but we just started here like a day ago. And then people say, well, what is this? But for me, this is life. This is not the extraordinary, even though we experience it very often, we don't experience it so often, but this is how life actually is. You're not a stranger to yourself, to others. We just live in this normally. So we get a taste of the true possibility or true function of life, which is this interconnectedness. Feels like this. I feel alive. I feel connected with other people. I get inspired. I learn from everybody. I become an inspiration to everybody. And this is something you cannot simply do in an individual setting, which is also very important for certain other things that you cannot do in a group setting. But this is something that is very sacred, and there is not so much really in our modern cultures anymore where we come together and we take space for that. And what is also very interesting often is when people come in, and I do the same. I go to a workshop, I have my problem and I have my question, and it's like we need to work this out, and I hope I have my constellation, and like I need to go, like we're so focused on ourselves. That's how we live our lives often. But then you go in and you go like, especially in constellation work or when we do these rituals where you're making yourself available to the question of another person. It's like a service to the other person. And at first feel like, okay, I'll see, and I'm gonna be in there. And often afterwards, people say, wow, that gave me all the answers. And
Right.
it was not in, and I was not in the focus. But now I understand. And this keeps normally popping over these times of these days. And then at one point, everybody gets a bit this feeling of like, so there's not like lots of individual questions. This is one question, one process that we're exploring here. And for me, and what I've heard from hundreds and hundreds of people is that this kind of work teaches you deeply about life. It's not about learning the principles of life, you experience that. And this is also a deep part of this work, that we're not just wanting to get more mental information, but to get an embodied sense of the things that are really relevant for my life. And it can be knowing about a tragedy in my ancestry, but it can also be knowing about just this feeling of importance and of general themes in humanity. And I feel like, oh, I'm part of humanity. Life lives itself through us. The topics repeat, but it's important that we live it. It's not just out there, we live it through. And it becomes very instructive and very, like, it orders things. So it's like twofold the process. You work with your own story, and they're very important to really sit in the lineage that you're coming from and not trying to have another family. It would be better if I would be there. There's a sacredness. I think that's a big question for all of our lives. What if I really accept that this is the condition of my life? And I know this so well, like, yeah, but if it could be a little bit, and that this person not in my, like, and just, if we would have it our way, we would shuffle a little bit the things. But if I surrendered to life and I say, so this is the perfect condition, as painful, difficult, whatever they might be, but this is the perfect condition for me to live my life and live my questions. So that journey is very deep individually. And then you also, on parallel to this, you learn a lot about life, and you don't even have to have a question to come in. You can just be curious about life and wanting to deepen your connection to life and to other people, and to know, oh, this is concerning all of us. And one of the things I just add that for me was really mind-blowing about learning about shamanism, and I don't know that much, but like one of these concepts where even widening the understanding of what an ancestor is. So there's very important, there's our bloodline, our biological ancestors. But if I live my life well and I become a mentor, a good friend, a teacher, an inspiration to anybody, I become an ancestor of an energy that lives in them in a way that supports life. And that I found very inspiring to have influence, and I'm being influenced all the time. So it matters. And at the same time, I can also relax into it because it anyway happens. So I think there's a few concepts that are a little bit different than what normally gets transpired in purely individual work.
Nice. Thank you. I'll name one thing, and then I'll give to both of you one last question, just acknowledging the time. That, yeah. So just I want to name one thing that I think, Gregor, we talked about a couple of days ago that might also be relevant for people, or that helped me definitely kind of see the power of this kind of work, which is the seeing more clearly how some of the challenges, or maybe all of the challenges that I'm facing, like the roots of them, or at least how they're connected to what my ancestors went through, that sometimes even just seeing that and being able to place a challenge somewhere and being like, oh yeah, this is, I'm reconnecting and somewhat like re-experiencing a story that my grandmother had already experienced, that just seeing that can already relieve some of this, like, oh, like something needs to change here, to like, yeah, like it's okay that this challenge is there. And for me, that's a big difference to like this individual healing work, where I would be more like, yeah, but I want to fix this problem. Like I don't want to feel these uncomfortable emotions, and I want to get it over with. And I think that's a beautiful thing, to be like, yeah, this is an expression of me coming from these ancestors. And if I acknowledge that, it already can kind of create a space where that's okay. I think that's a very beautiful thing.
Yeah. I can say one thing to that is the work is about being able, learning to relate in all kinds of ways. And then coming to what Gregor said, now even if you come to the workshop and you are not bringing a specific topic, but by being there, we are learning something, and is relating. Now, from this what you say, David, is the relating, to being able to relate to that situation in the way that situation is happening in me, is to be able to be with the challenge that is going through, that I'm facing, and being with it, and having the way to be with that. That is the power. That's then the power that it's not about, yeah, I'm living perfectly, and I'm living my dream, and this is, no, it's how I relate to whatever is moving and happening, coming to me in my life, and that has a power that nothing can take away. It's yeah. So it's really, in a very broad way, it's really learning to relate. It's to myself, and then to the world, to life.
Cool. Okay, so final question to both of you. We're talking a lot about certain qualities, like you were saying right now, about relating, about feeling connected, about feeling my roots. And what comes up for me is like this voice that's like, yeah, but I want to do my thing. Like I want to live, my life and what I want to do. And almost like this worry that if I connect more to where I'm coming from, I lose some of this possibility to do my thing. Like I want to have the freedom to do whatever I want. And yeah, I'd be curious to hear from either or both of you. How might this work actually help me live more my life and my freedom, and what can help to kind of get out of this mind fuck that it's like an either or.
Yeah. I'll give it a go, because that's something that's always, it always comes up in the work and in every life, I think. And so I want to say, when you say, I want to live my life, I want to do my thing, I fully 100% support that for you and from every other human being on this planet. Absolutely. That's the deepest wish, that you really, truly live your life fully. That's, I think it's the call of life, that life wants us to do that also.
Mm.
Now, what we need to look then is, what does that mean, truly living one's own life individually, like as a true individual? And I think we have a very misconstructed idea of what individuality and freedom is in our modern world. So what you're saying about, like, oh, I'm gonna feel oppressed, or if I go and connect more with my ancestors, where I come from, I'm going to be swallowed. That's always the underlying fear. And then I'm going to be just not free anymore to express myself, like being kind of like, I have to get back into conformity, or be overwhelmed by all the stuff that went on maybe generations back. I think that's the voice you're speaking to. That's the voice of the Western materialistic modernity, where we say like, oh, done with all of that, let's just be free and live our life. The problem is, it just really, really doesn't work like this. That freedom is not, true freedom does not meaning to be free of. Like, freedom is not disconnecting from, because life always wants to be complete and full. So when we disconnect from something, that will be pushed into the shadows. So suddenly my hand is not anymore on the screen, it's outside the screen, but it will come back from another angle somewhere, or this way or something. So like, also the psychological insight of Western therapy is like, if you put something into the shadow, it will come haunt you, just with different symptoms and forms. So when you try to go away from life, like Komala, you said, like you suddenly go to another continent, you live a very different life, and you think, now I'm free. Just live your life, and you will feel suddenly things will reoccur that only make sense, again, if you put them in context of a larger frame of life. Or it will come to you, or it will come maybe to your children, or it will appear somewhere around you. So if we want to be truly free, it means freedom is to be able to choose. And choice comes out of the possibility to connect, or to be like, to put my attention here, or to not here, to some place else. So it means the freedom comes from being fully connected, and therefore I can make a choice. If I need to disconnect, I have only one choice: to not look there anymore, and to avoid that. And I think that's individually, but also collectively, a huge problem, that we think we got so far, finally we got freed of the shackles of the past, and suddenly, I mean, now we see it on so many spheres in our geopolitics, so many different forms of crises. Suddenly stuff comes and bites us in the back again. So it might work for a while, and it's an important phase in life, often also like in early adulthood, where you feel like gonna do things differently. Great, go for it. And suddenly, if you feel the call to be more free, because you might feel very unfree being yourself all the time, and like having to be different, then that's a call to reconnect. And it's this paradox: if I really connect, actually I have more space. And the fear is the fear of maybe childhood fears and stuff that even again happened in ancestry, that we need to attend to, that there were maybe stuff that was overwhelming, but it's not looking away that makes us free. It's looking towards, with choice and with support. Also what Komala said, you need the resources first, and then there is more options. And that paradox can't be outsmarted, I would say.
Nice. Komala, any closing
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I would say to that it needs my drive, my individual drive, and my longing is so fundamental. Is what actually creates the space for the energy that comes from my back or my roots to move forward. And that's the drive. Like it's almost like my wanting, my longing is kind of the future. Is the possibilities, the highest possibilities that I have. And that's fundamental for evolution to keep going and for life to keep thriving and being creative. And what I almost see that when you ask that question, I see this, but when I open to feel and to connect and to sense and receive my ancestors in me and that energy, that will inform that longing, that drive, and make it real and make it aligned. And that will bring in then the force and the power to really thrive and create. Somehow I almost see that as an image, I see it as an image, this energy, my drive like a future, and then the past, or which is not past, it's just energy, raw energy, I would even say, how it feels to me. And this coming together in myself, and that is my call. That is the beauty of being here in this world and bringing these energies and moving it forward. Yeah. It's exciting. I feel really excited when we talk about it. Yeah.
We could spend like 4 more hours, or let's say that's what we then do in the workshop. We have much more space to explore all these questions, because as you said, like you come in with a certain idea, maybe to a workshop like this, that's what you're going to work through, and suddenly suddenly something else opens, and it really then has the possibility to teach you about something you didn't even know you had a question. And that's the beauty, that this then can become an information, but from your inside, and it will maybe have effects you couldn't even imagine before.
Yes, great.
Well, Right to Be workshop, Vienna, September
Yes.
6th to 8th.
Yes, it's
6th and 8th.
6 to 8 in Vienna. It's going to be an international group, or at least that's the call. We're going to teach this in English together, because that's how we work together. People feel not so comfortable with fully in English. We can also provide some spaces for some translations in German. And it's going to be a big mix of doing rituals for everybody, individual process work for everybody, to also explore your ancestry, doing some specific constellation works. We do movement also, working with the body, so about to strengthen this embodiment perspective, and open process work. And it's going to be a colorful mix of different things. We have a plan, we have a toolbox, but how the individual field creates, it's not we are creating the workshop, we are just offering a space. We have things to move, what is needed, and then together we create a field that will then tell us what wants to happen. And that's the exciting and creative part.
Yes.
Beautiful. Well, summer bonus available for another 2 weeks till end of July. So if you feel called to join,
right,
to take advantage of that. Hey, thank you, the two of you.
Yeah.
thank you, David. Thank you, Komala.
David. Thank you, Gregor.